is Gina at the Library Mouse. Welcome or welcome back. So today I have a fun little tag video that I was tagged in by Pat at Book Chat with Pat. And the name of the tag is the winning title tag, and it was created by Heather at Heather Reads. So the premise of this is that you are answering the prompts based on the title of the books. So the sentence starter starts out as, have I ever bought a book because? So we need to see if, have I ever bought a book because it had a funny title. So I guess this book I didn't buy because it was ha-ha funny, but I did buy it because it was intriguing, like, this sounds pretty good, and it's a unique title. So this is a little volume called Still Life with Chickens. And I thought it sounded cute, and it made me want to pick it up and see what it was about. So it is Still Life with Chickens, starting over in a house by the sea. I don't know about you, but I've often fantasized about starting over in a little house by the sea. It is a memoir by Catherine Goldhammer. So this was a really cute book. It's very light. It's funny. It's all about Catherine. I love the start of it. She says, I didn't have a year in Provence or a villa under the Tuscan sun. I didn't have a farm in Africa. Instead, my diminished resources dictated a move to a rundown cottage in a honky-tonk town where live bait is sold from vending machines. Side note, around the corner from me, there is a live bait vending machine. I don't know if that means I live in a honky-tonk town. I came to live in a hidden place at the edge of a salt pond beside a small forest 900 feet from the sea. In a town where everyone knows everything, I came to live in a place no one knows exists. So she transforms her house along with her daughter into this oasis for herself. So it was very good. I liked it. It had kind of a funny title. So the second prompt is, have I ever bought a book because it had a heartwarming or homey title? And yes, I actually just did, and it just arrived yesterday. So I follow an Instagrammer named Layla Palmer. She has an account called The Lettered Cottage, and she's very much into home decor, DIY. I started reading her when she had a blog, which has now turned into a vlog. But she has recently written a book called Coming Home. If that's not a homey or heartwarming title, I don't know what is. I watched her create it online on her Instagram account, and the book seemed like it would be something I would really be interested in. So I did order it. It is not a novel, and it's not nonfiction. Well, it's a collection. It's a collection of stories, recipes, photographs, letters. She has dealt with some ongoing panic and anxiety issues, and this book was made in part because of that. And the whole concept of what does coming home actually mean. What's interesting is I went and opened the book, and it's printed upside down. And backwards. So I have to turn around. This is the front of the book. So actually it's the back. I have to turn it and flip it and go this way. I did contact the bookseller to see if I could exchange it, but I'm like, oh, maybe I won't. But this is a really nice book. I have not read it yet. But in the middle of it, she does have some book recommendations. I'll just read a couple. So if you love a good memoir, here's some of her suggestions. The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom, The Ministry of Ordinary Places by Shannon Martin, The Fairy Tale Girl, Martha's Vineyard, Isle of Dreams, and A Fine Romance by Susan Branch, all of those titles. Free Country by George Mahood. She has a section called If You Want to Be Transported by Fiction. Escape to the French Farmhouse by Joe Thomas. Summer at Seafall Cottage by Lily Graham. The High Tide Club by Mary Kay Andrews. And If You Feel Alone, The Comfort Book by Matt Haig. I like Matt Haig. He wrote The Midnight Library, which I thought was an extremely interesting book with a very cool premise behind it. But anyway, it looks like it will be a great book to read. I have not read it yet, but recipes and photos. So this is the book I bought because it just feels cozy, right? And homey, and that's why I bought it. So the next prompt is, have I ever bought a book because of a shocking title? None of these books I really bought because of the title, but I'm going back through and looking at the title, and the title definitely intrigued me enough to want me to try the book, I guess. So the shocking title is And I Don't Want to Live This Life, a story of my daughter's murder. And it is written by Deborah Spungen. So if you are at all familiar with Sid Vicious and the Sex Pistols, you are probably familiar with his girlfriend, Nancy. There's been a movie called Sid and Nancy made, and they were a very well-known couple in the 70s, early 80s maybe, late 70s. So her daughter Nancy was murdered at the Chelsea Hotel. She was stabbed to death, and they didn't know if Sid Vicious had done it or if it was an intruder. But the book doesn't really focus on that. The book really focuses on this mother who's had to deal with her daughter's mental illness that she knew she had almost from the time she was an infant. She was a baby that cried all the time. She said she was a toddler who attacked people. When she became a preteen teen, she became addicted to drugs and violence. And she ran away often. And in the 60s, 70s, finding someone who could help in the mental health arena was very different than it is now. And it really focused on how much her daughter's mental illness took a toll on the mother and the siblings and the parents' marriage, and just how heartbreaking it was to watch her daughter go through the trials that she went through without really being able to help her. So that's what the book mostly focuses on. Her growing up and her mother and father and siblings trying to deal with the mental health issues and how that affected her family. So that was And I Don't Want to Live This Life by Deborah Spungen. The next prompt is a book that has an unusual combo of words. And so the book that I picked was the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society. I think that just has a unique combo of words, because when you think of a literary society, you generally don't think of potato peel pie, which I didn't even know was a thing. But this book was really, really good. And it does have a movie to go with it. It was adapted from the book. I enjoyed the movie and I enjoyed the book. I can't remember which one I watched or read first. But basically, it is a story of post-World War II London. Juliet is a writer, and she's looking for her next subject. And she begins a correspondence with this man who actually found a letter that she had written and stuck in a book. And it wound up on the Isle of Guernsey, where he lives. And she begins a correspondence with him, and he tells her all about the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society, which they kind of made up as an alibi to get out of breaking their curfew when their island was occupied by the Germans. So through these letters, she gets to know the people on the island, and it basically changes her life. And it really is like an ode to letter writing. And I feel bad, I think, sometimes for this generation who's not going to have that ephemera to look back on and read, because everything is virtual. And it makes a difference to pick it up and hold it in your hand, I think. When I went away to college, and then afterward, my father was a prolific letter writer, and he always typed it on his typewriter because his handwriting was so bad. And I have the letters that he wrote to me when I was in college. I have letters that he wrote to me when I was a young mom. And I love having them because his personality shines through. And it would be different than if all I had were a bunch of text messages from him. So, excellent, excellent book. Really good movie. If you haven't watched it or read it, I recommend it. So, the next prompt is a story with a fantastical or magical title. And I don't read fantasy very often, so I really had to scour my books that I have read to find it. But as soon as I saw it, I'm like, oh yes, I remember choosing this book because the cover and the title reminded me of a fairy tale. And I thought the concept was interesting and different, so that is why I borrowed this book from the library. So the name of the book is The Snow Child, and it is by Eowyn Ivey. And basically it follows this couple. Their names are Jack and Mabel. It's 1920s frontier Alaska. Very, very difficult. They are homesteading, trying to make a new life for themselves. It is very, very harsh, as you can imagine. And they're drifting apart. Jack has a huge workload. Mabel is extremely lonely. And one day after their first snowfall, they decide to build not a snowman, but a snow child. And when they wake up in the morning, the snow is still there, but the snow child is gone. And instead, they glimpse this little blonde girl running through the forest with a fox. And she calls herself Faina. And they basically treat Faina as if she is their daughter. However, as the way of mystical fairy tale-ish stories, they find out that Faina is not exactly what she appears to be, and it pretty much transforms them all. It was a really good book. It was actually a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize in 2013. So if you have not checked it out, I recommend it. It was a really good book. It was a good book. So the next one is a contradiction. The title is a contradiction or describes something impossible. So I thought this combo was a contradiction. It's the book Icy Sparks. So you think of ice and sparks. Contradiction. It's by Gwen Hyman Rubio, and it's about a little girl. She's 10 years old. She's being raised by her grandparents. Very loving family. And then when she's 10, she starts getting these uncontrollable urges to croak, to groan. She has spasms. She's very embarrassed by it, and she tries with all her might to get her body to stop doing it, but she never tells anybody what's happening. Now, she winds up spending some time in a mental institution, and as an adult later, she comes to find out that she had Tourette's, but they didn't label it that in the 1950s. I believe she lives in eastern Kentucky, Appalachia maybe. I can't remember, but that is what I think I'm remembering. It was a good book. I like the character development of Icy. It got preachy at the end, so if that's not your thing, just be aware. It was, I believe, an Oprah's book club book, but it was a good book. And I did choose it. The title definitely caught my attention, and so did the cover of the book. I'll put that up here. So that was Icy Sparks by Gwen Hyman Rubio. Okay, so the next prompt is, have I ever bought a book that had a title that sounded like a line of poetry? No. I didn't pick this book up because of that, but now that I think about it, it does have a title that sounds like a line of poetry. And I actually think there's a couple poems that have it or have it as a title, and that is I Am Watching You by Teresa Driscoll. It is a thriller, and I don't read very many thrillers, but if I'm going to read something different than like contemporary women's literature or historical fiction, I will pick up like a suspense or a thriller, usually a suburban thriller. But anyway, this book centers on Ella. She's on a train, and she sees a couple of attractive young men flirting with a couple young girls, teenagers, I think. I think that's what they were, young. And she doesn't think too much about it until she overhears them talking, and she figures out that these guys are just fresh out of prison. And she has this intuition that she really should warn somebody that they're not up to any good. And she hems and she haws about it, and she can't figure out if she should or shouldn't. Maybe try to find the mom or alert someone like the conductor on the train or call the police. So eventually, though, she decides not to do anything because she walks by the bathroom and she hears one of the girls having relations with one of the men. And she kind of washes her hands of the whole thing and says, oh, you know what, I'm not going to bother. Well, she wakes up the next morning to hear on the news that one of the girls has disappeared and she can't be found. So she lives the next year feeling extremely guilty because she didn't say anything. And it's one of those, I should have done this. What would have happened if I had told somebody? Would I have been able to save her? Would she be missing still? And she begins to receive some letters threatening her when it was discovered that she was one of the last people to have seen her alive. And she didn't say anything, even though she wanted to. And she felt strange about it. So she's living with this guilt. And now she's getting threatened. So the one thing that I did not like about this book is that it's told from so many different points of view. Her portion of the book is told in first person, and then other people are telling the story, but in third person. So there's different chapters based on different people's views. And I really wish they had just focused on Ella instead of the author sharing so many different viewpoints and people. But it was an interesting thriller called I Am Watching You by Teresa Driscoll. Last but not least, have I ever bought a book that made me ask a question because of the title. So yes, actually, I did buy a book that made me ask a question. It is not a fiction book. It is a nonfiction book, and it is Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, Living the Wisdom of the Tao by Dr. Wayne W. Dyer, not Dwyer. So yes, I bought this book because it did make me ask the question, I don't know anything about the Tao, but I would like to learn, and I'm wondering what the wisdom was that will help me change my life. I did not finish this book. Oh, look, I did dog-ear it though, and I dog-ear it. I got up to Living by Your Inner Light. So I love listening to him talk. I think he's a very intelligent, spiritual person, but you can see he goes through all of the verses, and he has a chapter for every verse. This actually might be one that maybe I'll pick it up again, but it did raise questions for me. And like they said, this is a work to be read slowly, one verse a day. So I like that idea. Maybe that would be a great morning read, a verse a day. Maybe I could even sum it up in a short. But anyway, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life by Dr. Wayne W. Dyer. And on that note, that is the end of the winning title tag created by Heather at Heather Reads. So hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you have some new books that maybe sound good that you want to check out. And I will see you on my next video. Happy reading!